So today we're going to take a look at a scenario where Canada goes into civil war. So I ran a poll on my channel last week and this was the most popular video idea. That poll is still open, so make sure you go and vote for next week's video. Before we get into the scenario, please feel free to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. All support is greatly appreciated as we try to reach our goal of 5,000 subscribers. So yeah, let's get right into this. So I wasn't really sure how this might play out. Might have Quebec wanting to separate from Canada, but I don't think that would really start a civil war, especially in this day and age. So I'm going to be doing this a little bit differently. We have Ontario and Quebec, the two probably most powerful Canadian provinces, each on their own respective team, the red and the blue teams, and each province is going to be joining one side or the other. Starting on the east coast, a lot of these provinces would probably join the red team, except for New Brunswick. They're going to join the blue team because if you didn't know, they're also a French-speaking province, just like Quebec. Actually, they're bilingual, if you didn't know. So a lot of these provinces would join the red team, but due to their proximity to Quebec, they'd probably just get steamrolled. So they're actually going to make a smarter decision and join the blue team. Moving it farther west, we have Manitoba and Nunavut joining on the red team. For the same reason, a lot of these provinces join the blue team, just because they're closer to Ontario. So they're all going to join the red team. Moving farther west, we had Alberta and Saskatchewan to the blue team. And the rest of these provinces could really go either way. But just to make it a little bit more interesting, I'm going to add Northwest Territories and the Yukon to the blue team, and then British Columbia to the red team. So now that our map is fully colored in, let's get right into this scenario. Right away, we have Quebec pushing over into northern Ontario, taking over a lot of land along the Hudson's Bay, along with Nunavut's southern islands. They make a landing on Baffin Island, hoping to push up and capture Iqaluit. We see Nunavut push over and capture a lot of the Northwest Territories' northern islands, as that is their main objective in this war, is just to take over all the islands. They do this quite successfully, and eventually they have captured almost all of the islands. Farther south, however, the Northwest Territories are actually pushing over into Nunavut. They do push over and capture a lot of land from Nunavut. Farther south, we actually have Alberta trying to push into BC via the Yellowhead Pass and the Kicking Horse Pass. There isn't really a lot of room here as it's the mountains, so they are eventually stalemated and they don't take a lot of land. And we also have the Yukon pushing down south and into BC, taking a little bit of their panhandle here. This doesn't go so well, however, as BC is now fully mobilized and they completely push out the Yukon and push over the border into the other province, or I guess territory. Yukon was kind of expecting this, but BC is definitely a lot stronger than they are, and so they begin to sweep through this territory. Now I know there are mountains here, but BC doesn't care. They have mountains too, so they're probably specially trained for this. But eventually they do capture Whitehorse, and that does lead to the surrender of this province. We do actually see the Northwest Territories pushing into the Yukon in order to save a little bit of land. They only take a little bit out of the northern areas before British Columbian troops arrive and begin to push them back. They are stalemated about here, however, and BC does begin to push into the Northwest Territories from the south. They also push through northern Alberta, just slightly, as they spearhead towards Great Slave Lake. Eventually they secure a little bit of land around the northern area of this lake, and they are threatening Yellowknife. Alberta pushes over into BC just slightly, and their campaign actually goes a lot better than BC's campaign into Alberta. BC is pushed back by Alberta just slightly, but they do hold a heavy offensive along this front line, and Alberta is able to take a little bit more land out of BC before eventually being stalemated about here. Over in central Canada, we have Manitoba pushing over into southern Saskatchewan and out along this lake. Their campaign goes quite well as they push out from all along their border, but eventually reinforcements from Alberta do arrive, and they're stalemated about here. Nunavut starts a campaign into the southern Northwest Territories, and this actually goes quite well, as they weren't expecting an invasion from this region. Manitoba pushes into northern Saskatchewan and to southern Northwest Territories in order to assist Nunavut in this invasion. Eventually they spearhead over and cut the rest of the Northwest Territories off from the south. Over in eastern Canada, we actually have Quebec pushing over and capturing Ottawa and Ontario. This doesn't last long, however, as they are pushed back, and Ontario starts their own invasion of southern Quebec. They push up along the St. Lawrence and threaten Montreal, and they continue to push through the southern area south of the St. Lawrence. They continue to push up, and eventually they meet the border of New Brunswick. Eventually they capture the rest of the southern area, and from there, an offensive into New Brunswick is started. Now I think I mentioned at the start of this video that a lot of these provinces over here would likely join the red team. Well, seeing the success that Ontario is having in New Brunswick and southern Quebec, a lot of these provinces are going to make the decision to join the red team and switch sides. Now this might not be the best decision to do, especially with Quebec still here, but nevertheless, they do push into New Brunswick, forcing the province into surrendering. Quebec was kind of expecting this, and so they very quickly pushed over into Labrador, taking out much of the area in the north, and pushing across, and eventually this region does surrender. They do make a landing in northern Newfoundland, and they quickly take over the island, and the province finally surrenders. Ontario pushes in a little bit more into southern Quebec, but eventually they are stalemated about here. Nunavut does manage to take over the rest of the islands from the Northwest Territories, and along all the front lines, they're pretty much stalemated, and it is now that they're actually going to go ahead and do up a peace treaty between the provinces. And that peace treaty looks something like this. The map looks completely different now, as I'm sure you can tell. We'll start over here in the east. Quebec annexed all of Newfoundland and Labrador, and some of northern Ontario. Ontario annexed a lot of southern Quebec, and a lot of New Brunswick. Nova Scotia annexed a little bit of land out of New Brunswick, and Prince Edward Island isn't just an island anymore. They also have this little bit of land in New Brunswick. Moving up north, we see that Quebec actually took over a lot of Nunavut's southern islands, but that Nunavut did take over all of the Northwest Territories islands as well. Moving further west, we see that Manitoba took over a lot of land in eastern Saskatchewan and the southern Northwest Territories, and British Columbia annexed a little bit of land in northern Alberta. They had a bit of a land swap with Alberta, as Alberta also took out some land in northern BC, and a little bit of land in the Yellowhead and Kicking Horse Passes, as they did take over those lands. BC annexed all of southern Yukon, and Northwest Territories annexed the rest of it, because it wouldn't really sustain itself if it remained. But the Northwest Territories was kind of cut off from the southern portion, and they did see that over to Alberta and Saskatchewan, who united together after this war, as Saskatchewan lost a lot of land. And so yeah, that's actually going to do it for today's video. So if you did enjoy this video, please feel free to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. All support is greatly appreciated. Leave any comments or video suggestions below. As always, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.